Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. And on this episode, it's a look back at two Microsoft events, Inspire and the Business Application Summit. Plus, we highlight several new contributed pieces from subject matter experts, as well as salary data and more. And joining me this week on the Roundup podcast is our assistant editor, Eamon McCarthy-Earls. Eamon, welcome.
Thank you, Jason.
All right, so let's jump right into this. We have quite a bit to cover here, and we're going to start by going back a little further to the earliest thing that we're going to talk about, I think, which is Inspire 2018, the annual Microsoft partner event. I'll give you my quick impression first. I wasn't at the event this year. They really limited media access because they also had, it was not just partners there, but also the Global Microsoft Sales Conference. In talking to partners who were there and listening to the sessions that were streamed and so forth, kind of a quiet event compared to previous years. I mean, if you think back a year, they had introduced the one commercial partner model, and it really threw everything into almost upheaval as far as partners were concerned. This year, nothing like that. So I think some of the things that we reported on and others seem to be reporting on were, I would say, quite a bit tamer. And my overall take when talking to partners was this was a good thing. I mean, less drama, less surprise, really no upheaval. A lot of messages around staying the course on things that really are important, like the partner programs, one commercial partner, licensing, product roadmaps to an extent. I think that's always a place where there's change, but I think a lot of what partners heard was not terribly exciting, but a lot of maybe more consistency.
So throughout the Inspire conference this year, one of the very interesting things that did happen is that Microsoft, I guess perhaps not intentionally, released quite a bit of information to partners about current active users for Dynamics 365 for finance and operations. And some very interesting numbers there. What was your take on all of that, Jason?
Well, yeah, the reveal of some stats about Dynamics 365 finance operations uptake was, I think, good news for the channel. Microsoft is very protective about those numbers, and they may have they ended up bringing down that information that they first shared publicly. But those stats did show that there's over 3x growth in the 365 finance operations customer base, and I think that's good news. I mean, I think they probably would be best off sort of putting that into really the position that they want to, because people are certainly very curious about that kind of information, to kind of gauge how the company's doing. Is that progress? Is that meeting their goals? It would be, I'd certainly be more interested to know perspective on that, but we kind of got it in a more of, I guess you'd say, almost a sort of a raw format with not a lot of, not a lot of positioning around it or a lot of context around it. Still, very interesting to hear some of that material, coming out of Microsoft and being shared there. So, and I think just to add to, I think the other piece of it that was particularly interesting was, the commitment that the company is making to pushing the cloud approach forward with, I guess, semi-annual sort of hard updates that don't let any customers fall behind. It's a big new challenge. We're only starting to touch on. I mean, I wrote about that as well, coming out of the sort of D365 FO partner updates.
I was particularly struck by some of the cloud numbers in that graphic that they released with it. The fact that 80% of customers for Dynamics 365 for finance and operations are in fact choosing the online model, and that there seems to be more and more emphasis away from sort of the on-premises approach that's been taken in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think the positioning there was, about 80% overall are going with cloud, but even more than that are going with it for that particular app, for the 365 FO. Solution itself is greater than that, which is pretty interesting. I've certainly heard from partners, especially who said they decided to go. They've had customers go on-prem. I would have a real suspicion that those companies could even take longer to deploy than the cloud. The ones who choose to go to the cloud, like if I don't know this, but if Microsoft told me that the on-prem were the ones that were sort of slower on uptake, where they had bought it but they weren't live yet, It wouldn't surprise me, but we don't have that data. But yeah, absolutely. But I think like I was saying with the these cloud updates, it's going to be a big adjustment, and that's probably one of the next things that that partners are going to have to work very, very hard to manage with their clients, and Microsoft's going to, I think, be very challenged to sort of manage for both partners and end users. At least as I get it rolling, I think maybe it ought to it ought to settle down into a new cadence at that point. But I think it's a big transition that's coming, in the next few months here.
And sort of, furthering the growth of the Dynamics 365 product line, at the Inspire conference, Microsoft also announced that up to 16 new countries would be added to Business Central support in 2018. That was something that you focused on a little bit more than I did, Jason. What were some of the markets that they were going after with new countries?
Oh, you're going to put me on the spot. So it's actually, so this reporting came from sort of a Microsoft MVP on site who was sort of observing and reporting as he went. But this was, and it was, I believe, Alexander Ermakov, and it was Alexander Ermakov. He kind of captured some of this for us, but it was looks like 3 countries coming in the fall from Microsoft: Mexico, Iceland, and Norway. And then partners are delivering localizations for, it looks like 12 other countries, or they're committed to, I suppose, and it's really all over the place in Africa and the Pacific and Asia, Middle East as well in there. So even Ireland, a localization. So Europe, really all over the globe almost, except for I don't see any other Latin American countries in that list. There's Mexico, but yeah. So a broad range, which has got to be good news. I think there's others coming as well, including you might have mentioned Russia is still in the works. So I think you certainly see Microsoft committing to some of it and leaning on their partners for a lot of the other countries that they're not going to serve, at least immediately.
And then a week after the Inspire conference, of course, there was the Business Applications Summit, which you had a chance to attend in Seattle, which was another big showcase for Microsoft, also very focused on Dynamics as well.
Yeah, I mean, 2 back-to-back events like that. Timing, I suppose, is actually not bad. If they're going to make announcements and shape them for different audiences, why not do it like as close together as possible? I guess I can see the logic in that. I don't think it was necessarily on purpose. The Business Application Summit sort of, followed on from previous, what do you call it, insight and analytics summits based on Power BI. I'm probably getting the name wrong, but Power BI focused and reporting focused summit events that Microsoft has done in the past that really weren't focused on Dynamics. This time they brought in, I think it was about 50% Dynamics, 50% Power BI and other Power Platform products. That's sort of new nomenclature. Power Platform, capital P, Power, lowercase p, Platform. So that's, I think, sort of the standard you're going to see going forward when Microsoft people talk about Power Apps, Flow, Power BI, and kind of maybe Common Data Service as well, but Power Platform. Seems like they've settled on that. But yeah, different event, different audience, much different audience as far as I can tell. A lot more sort of power user focused. That is, users who sort of build Power Apps, who use Dynamics, who run, who work in Power BI all day, those kinds of people, as opposed to really, that's who it was tailored to, though I did hear there were a lot of executives there as well. So I got the chance to attend that. That was Seattle. That was in Seattle. It was only a 2-day event.
And I certainly had a similar impression in terms of the new sort of focus, I guess you could say, on the Power Platform as their new nomenclature, spanning Power BI and Power Apps. Watching the keynote, I was very struck. They focused very heavily on that sort of integration between Power Platform and Dynamics. There's a number of pretty interesting demonstrations that they did throughout the nearly 2-hour presentation, showing various integrations with everything from LinkedIn to HoloLens, the Microsoft mixed reality service in connection with field service. Also examples mixing marketing, sales, talent, and a very heavy focus on low-code developers, they invited a gentleman from the UK who works for a company I believe called Belron, basically a major window glass company, and who designs with Power Apps and Power BI for them to create simple applications for their field workers, as well as with that sort of focus. The summit also was timed with the opening up of release notes for upcoming changes in October 2018. More than 200 pages of new information from Microsoft.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I did appreciate you watching that opening keynote carefully. I was still in a plane at that point trying to get to Seattle after some weather delays. So I got there just after the keynote had finished, but yeah, everything I saw from it, and a lot of the sessions that followed after it, kind of carried on that same theme where, there was very specific product roadmap stuff and information about individual products. Many sessions that I did catch were looking at not only one product, but often two or more products supporting each other and working kind of in conjunction with each other. And my sense was they're doing it in a way that, was pretty solid, even if it was preview or stuff that was still in private preview even. And you can kind of see where Microsoft's very serious about it versus where it was really just proof of concept. For example, I wrote about the integration plans for Teams and Dynamics 365 for sales. That's a private preview that's going on right now, but Microsoft showed it off to, a big room full of people who clearly knew a lot about the sales app, and quite a few who knew about Teams or predecessors to Teams like Yammer or SharePoint, and they went pretty deep on it. I mean, they were trying to answer almost any question that the audience could throw at them. Them being Microsoft program managers who were presenting the integration, and what they showed was. It had limitations, and they were open about that because it is an early days. It is a private preview, code base right now. But they have fairly specific and fairly in-depth scenarios in mind that they want to support for that in particular integration, working between Teams and sales to support specific sales scenarios, and some of the ways that they will kind of give, sort of manage that going back and forth between the sort of the D365 interface and the Teams interface for users who have access to one but not both. Or specifically Teams, but not sales. Another example was Power Apps, where I think I probably only saw a little bit of what was shown for Power Apps throughout the couple of days there, but Power Apps popped up in a lot of sessions. I know it was showed off in conjunction with D365 FO. It was showed in conjunction with sales, I believe, and probably showed off in conjunction with Power BI because you can embed Power Apps there too. So Microsoft's really trying to kind of bring that story across and show those interactions, and the mixed reality too. We see sort of the first sort of productized two applications of HoloLens sort of integrated with Teams, and then obviously and I believe the keynote even had it integrated not just with Teams but with field service, right? So there was a sort of field service scenario that sort of drove the launching remote assist from HoloLens for that mixed reality experience.
And also tracking in SharePoint as a way to share information, for instance, from a field service call with subsequent technicians that may have to go out there in the future. So you have sort of a demo case for them to refer back to.
Yeah, it's almost like there's so many ways you can share this information now with the various tools that are there that it could be done through SharePoint. It could be done through the field service app. Could be, carried through to Teams if it's people who aren't, or just within a Power App if it's data that's not going to be in the Dynamics product. So really, really sort of new levels of flexibility that Microsoft's proposing, which is an interesting thing to give to your customers. Sort of more and more flexibility within this sort of sphere of these products that they're launching. That's probably one of the most interesting sort of unknowns, I would say, coming out of this. I did. Oh, by the way, I also got a chance to try the HoloLens while I was at the event, which was pretty pretty neat experience. Have you ever done an augmented reality or a mixed reality
To be
glasses
honest,
type
I
of thing?
haven't. What
Yeah.
was the experience like?
It worked pretty well. I think I needed a little bit of training. I think I, I didn't do as well with it as some of the other people who were sort of demoing it, sort of in the expo hall. I had a lot of more trouble than I expected with sort of the finger motions where you can. So instead of tapping on a screen or clicking a mouse, you sort of make these little pinchy sort of movements with your fingers to try to indicate what you would do to click, right? So if you want to click on something, instead you make sort of hold your hand up and pinch your fingers together. And it wasn't working that well for me. I think maybe I just wasn't doing it right or something, or I wasn't holding my hand in the right place. So I messed a few things up. Like there's a layout app which is really cool, where you can sort of move sort of 3D models around in 3D space. And I ended up with like a conveyor belt, like up sort of half inside a wall and stuff like that. But I did make it. I was able to make it work, and the examples were pretty cool. And the visuals of it were really strong. I mean, it looked really good. Seeing the way things were sort of cast onto real physical walls, or kind of cast into space in front of the things you were focused on. I mean, that stuff worked really well. I think the controls I needed a little more work on, and maybe they
It's a
need to
pretty
be
impressive
refined
piece of
too.
technology.
It was. It was. And I think Microsoft's had their ups and downs getting it to this point, but I think it is looking good. And I heard in more than one session, Microsoft people saying they're serious about using HoloLens in sort of integrated scenarios for field service, especially, but probably other ways too.
So we've also been very focused, as always, at MS Dynamics World on partner news and the ISV space. While the summer has been, in some ways, a little bit of a quiet season in terms of big announcements, one of our contributors, James Lloyd Townshend, from the Nigel Frank Group, contributed a very interesting analysis of the recent Frank Group survey, their annual survey, looking at partners and the situation in the industry. And this one was very focused on salaries, as their survey always does. And so some of the data this year was fairly interesting. There was a finding that even though many members of the Dynamics community do have certifications or education specific to Dynamics, virtually across the board, they rank experience as the biggest deciding factor in terms of earnings. 56% said that years of Dynamics experience was the biggest factor in the amount earned. Additionally, 61% of partners had seen their workloads increase, up from 58% last year. And there was also some information that was fairly interesting about satisfaction in the current job market. 68% of respondents, they were happy in their present role, but open to new opportunities. And lack of advancement opportunities and lack of new challenges were some of the key factors that were prompting some people to consider leaving their current jobs. So important things for partners to keep in mind in terms of working with their professionals.
Yeah, I think staffing. If you're a partner, or even if you're a sort of a larger company that runs some of these systems, having the right staff, being able to find and hire the right staff has got to be a worry. Because there always seems to be a shortage. It's almost like a perennial discussion. I think that 68% is actually higher than, if you had just asked me for a number, I would have guessed it was a little lower. And there's some interesting factors at play. For example, I mean, you see all this new. For example, this past couple of weeks of conferences. You see all this new tech that's being pushed and released and in preview. If you're focused on Dynamics, you probably, if you're thinking about your career, you want to be on that stuff. You don't want to be on AX 2009 or Nav, or GP 2013 or, an old on-prem CRM system. You might be okay doing that in your current job if that's paying the bills, but you're probably looking at the new stuff and thinking, I want to get to a job that can give me that. Let me get my hands on that, not keep working on this 6, 8, 9-year-old technology that we're kind of just keeping alive here. So that's just one more incentive for companies to upgrade and get themselves current, or if you're a partner to keep your staff sort of moving through the interesting projects and not letting them get stuck too far down the rabbit hole on old legacy stuff. Easier said than done, of course, but But
And I'm sure there's probably elements of apprehension as well, with all the changes afoot
yeah,
with the Dynamics 365 ecosystem, where some people may be concerned that they haven't moved on to newer systems and worry about falling behind in the partner space.
absolutely. And that's that goes back to experience. I mean, if you're in a good position where you have a lot of those opportunities, are you gonna? I don't know how many people feel they need to stop and get retrained. You always hear complaints about the relevancy of some of those exams. I think it just depends on your situation, though. If some jobs really value it, make it worth your while to get certified, other employers probably just don't care, right? They just care that you're competent, you can get your work, you can get the work done, you can understand the technology.
So throughout the past few weeks, we've also had some very interesting thought leadership from some of our contributors. Rahul Mota actually had a very interesting write-up showing 3 different scenarios and how to use different kinds of dashboards and functionalities for different situations with D365 FO. And his piece is particularly nice because it has a number of illustrations which really sort of bring to light a lot of different functionalities and serves to be very illustrative for readers if they seek to gain insights. We also had a very interesting piece from Simon Barrett about data synchronization using incremental push for composite entities in Dynamics 365. And very often organizations have to synchronize data between D365 ERP and third-party applications. But sometimes, if you have to run the entire system, it can be a fairly slow process to do the synchronization, especially if you have to export the entire table and do a full push from D365 to the other application. And to overcome this kind of cumbersome situation, Barrett recommended using basically a tactic called incremental push, syncing only entities that have been changed, added, or deleted as a way to economize your time.
All right, excellent. Yeah, and he had a fairly creative approach to solving that with some I guess minor customization.
And last but not least, among some of our recent thought pieces, Haynes Holst wrote a really great piece for us called 3 Key Factors of a Successful Microsoft Dynamics Nav Project, which I think probably in many ways holds true for D365 and emerging systems as well. And to briefly summarize a few of his key points, he recommends relying on standard features rather than customization in many circumstances, understanding what a business needs, and whenever possible, hiring a nav expert that's able to have an internal view of things at the company and be very focused on their needs. And that piece goes much more in depth than that. So certainly recommend that anyone interested in sort of key factors and key steps, check it out.
All right, thanks, Damon. Well, let's talk a little about what we have coming up. I'll go first. I had a few things on my mind. We'll be digging into the October 2018 release notes a little more. I think there's still some details worth calling out. I'm especially looking at the field service like we talked about before, and also the idea of intelligent edge ERP, especially intelligent edge sort of on-prem or hosted ERP, and what Microsoft's plans really look like around that. We should have a new executive Q&A interview piece coming out. We do have more podcasts planned with other guests. As fun as these roundups are, we also have other people joining us soon, so I'm planning for those. We're also going to be wrapping up a multi-part AX, or I guess it's D365 FO, training video series that we've been running in conjunction with the training company, item by item. It's Alif Etem's D365 video training on demand company. So we're going to wrap up that series on our site as well pretty soon. What about
Yes,
you?
and I'll be working on a profile throughout this coming week and continue to work with contributors from all around the world. Naturally, August is a big time for vacations in Europe, but a number of our contributors have agreed that they will be wrapping up some great thought pieces throughout August, even as they're at the beach somewhere in France or in Spain.
Yeah, it's funny. Some people use their vacation time to not do anything, and others use it to catch up on thinking that they're doing and writing that they're doing that's not part of their day-to-day job, which is always great to see.
And I'm also very excited. We have the beginnings of another roundup focused on flow and all the emerging capabilities with it and emerging use cases, which we expect to come out with in the next week or two, which should be very exciting when we get that out.
Yeah, it's always fun to see those new flow use cases as new capabilities get added and people get more creative with it too. All right.
Right.
So I think we are ready to wrap up here, Eamon. Well, thanks for joining me once again. We'll have to do this again pretty soon for another Roundup style podcast.
Great. Thank you very much, Jason.
All right. And this has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert.
And I'm Eamon McCarthy Girls.
All right. Thanks for joining us.